Hey guys, welcome back. Dr. Zeke Medina, and today we are going to talk about low progesterone and why I can't sleep part 2. So if you missed the first video, I would highly recommend going back to that first video to really understand what are the causes, what are the symptoms, what are the lab tests that you can actually do, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But now we're going to talk about what to do if you did those lab tests or you are feeling those symptoms. So, like always, this is all educational. It is not here to override your doctor's specific plan for your individual needs. So, without further ado, let's talk about what we are going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to lessen these symptoms of progesterone or low progesterone, which oftentimes include how do we lower estrogen just naturally. With that, how to detox estrogen naturally so we can allow it to be out of our body and have healthy amounts of estrogen rather than having too much. And then lastly, this is about broccoli, more importantly in my family, broccoli sprouts, and then what are some supplements we can start thinking about. All right. So as it relates to this topic, this is specifically for women that are still in their menstrual cycle. If you are in menopause, this is most likely not for you. Got it? So let's talk about how to lessen the symptoms. Now, when it comes to this, we can consume foods that actually lower estrogen levels, which is helps to improve detox. So there are super nutrient dense foods that do that. There are supplements that we can take to help break down estrogen. There's also ways to take progesterone supplements to improve that. So we're going to talk about that today. And then if you are a candidate for bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, let's talk about progesterone that's out there commercially. And then let's talk about how to identify a physician or a pharmacy that could be a good candidate for you rather than going to these flaky type, compounders that are just businesses that are basically hopping on crazes and trying to make a profit and not really thinking about your health. So when we look at foods to lower estrogen, I like to tell my clients, let's focus on estrogen detoxing foods, which are typically cruciferous vegetables. I'm not a big fan of kale or cauliflower, but those are good. I can eat cauliflower with some buffalo sauce and some tacos and, put that in there. That's all right. Cabbage and sauerkraut, to me, that's great. I eat a lot of Brussels sprouts and broccoli. And just recently, my family and I started making broccoli sprouts. My 10-year-old daughter does this with a mason jar. You don't need anything fancy. So I've seen these fancy looking sprout makers that cost like over $100. You don't need that. You just need the seeds and a mason jar with a mesh part. Trust me. But with that, bok choy, mushrooms, seeds, nuts, beverages like green tea can really help eliminate estrogen. So what's happening when it comes to estrogen detox? Now, estrogen starts on that left side. It goes through a phase 1. Then it becomes this intermediate. And that intermediate can be good for your body or not so good. And then it goes into phase 2. And at phase 2, it hits our gut. And really, we should think it's done, but it goes through a phase 3 in our intestines where we have to make sure it is gone. Otherwise, sometimes it can go through another transformation and go right back into our bloodstream. So let's talk about phase 1. If you remember from the last video, we have 3 main metabolites. You have the 2-OH, which is more protective because it's a weak estrogen stimulating type metabolite. But then we have 4-OH, which damages DNA. And then there's 16-OH, which is more of a stronger metabolite of estrogen. So we don't want a lot of it, but if you go back, there's a lab that we can do to see what the ratio, the healthy amount needs to be. So we are not at high risk for issues down the road. Okay, so when it comes to phase 1, this is typically what the body does. It creates these 3 metabolites. And remember, we do want more of the 2-OH, and it's all in a balance. So you don't want no 4-OH or 16-OH. You still need those, but you need more 2-OH than the others. Now, when phase 2 occurs, it's typically things like methylation, glucuronidase, sulfation. These are nerdy things, okay? Don't worry about that. But when it comes to methylation, we have a gene called the COMT gene that controls how we methylate estrogen to get out or stay in. And we want a good balance. Some people are over methylators, some people are very under methylators. Either way, it's bad. So we need that balance to kick it out naturally. So phase 2 has to occur, which sends it most of the time into the bile, into our large intestines, and then we poop it out, or sometimes it goes to the kidneys and we pee it out. But when we look at phase 3, there's a thing in our body called the estrobolone, which is specifically aiding in that removal of estrogen. And remember how I told you there's transformations in the intestines that can send that estrogen right back in there? So we have to make sure we have good gut health. If our gut health is imbalanced, meaning there's bad bacteria that's more pro-inflammatory, more harmful in our gut over the good bacteria, we call this dysbiosis. And when that occurs, a lot of times you don't have that good bacteria to help estrogen safely get removed. It gets reabsorbed, and now you have estrogen dominant symptoms, which are listed here. You have heavy periods, mood swings, headaches, sleep disturbances, breast tenderness, and then those fibroids can start to build. Long term, this can increase your risk of autoimmunity and certain cancers and things like that. So that's why it's good to start worrying about the gut health and why it's so important. So when you look at it overall, you have those two phases mainly from the liver, and the rest is taken care of through the gut and the kidneys. These are just some of the minerals I just kind of wanted to highlight. Folic acid, choline, like from eggs, amino acids that like methionine, and then SAMe. All of these are important to kick out estrogen safely. So let's talk about one of our favorite vegetables, broccoli sprouts. So when you think about broccoli, or just broccoli in general, it contains three key elements that help with estrogen detox. It has DIM, I3C, and sulforaphane. Now, what do these do? You're probably asking. It helps to promote that 2-OH pathway. And remember, 2-OH was that healthier pathway. You remember this right here? It's a metabolite that's considered protective. And there's a lot of research that does suggest it has protective effects when it comes to breast tissue. So when you look at that, it's often for those individuals with estrogen dominance or high estrogen-related cancer risk. So if you've taken a saliva test from days 19 to 23, and you've looked at, oh, I have more estrogen than I'm supposed to, we could start taking these types of supplements or eating more broccoli sprouts to help remove estrogen safely. As you can tell with sulforaphane, it really does help kick out that excess estrogen, and it does so much more for our body. It is a very nutrient-dense vegetable that we should all be including in our diet at all times. Now, when we look at progesterone, right, how do we support this? There's really two supplements. There's chasteberry. Chasteberry helps to lower prolactin. Now, prolactin helps to suppress progesterone, and it also suppresses ovulation. So with something like this, it can creep up. So getting lab levels can really help indicate, ooh, why do I have prolactin? But chasteberry also increases luteinizing hormone, which stimulates progesterone. So when you look at this is for individuals that suffer from PMS, and that's going to be our next video. They have irregular periods, or they might have some issues with infertility. But this is something you do want to make sure your doctor's aware of, especially if they are trained in functional medicine. Oftentimes they would start you on something like this. The next one is ashwagandha. This is something that helps to control cortisol because, like I said, your body can produce cortisol or sex hormones, not both. So if you are constantly stressed or you have something going on in your body that causes stress, and I have a video about physical and mental stress that can cause cortisol to be elevated, ashwagandha could help. Start low, get a good quality supplement, because not all ashwagandha is made equally. It's not stored properly. It's not packaged properly. There's a lot of hidden things that can be in these supplements, so you want a good quality supplement. Now, when we look at supplements, there are a couple that I bring to my attention that work specifically for your sex hormones. There's a supplement called calcium D-glucarate. You can get this anywhere, but basically it helps to fight off what's called beta-glucuronidase. Beta-glucuronidase transform estrogen in the intestines, and it allows it to go right back into the bloodstream. This right here stops that, and it allows estrogen to safely get removed. Milk thistle, you hear this all the time for the liver. It is a anti-inflammatory, and it also helps with any type of just antioxidants just in general, making the liver work more effectively. And with that, a healthy liver is going to detox better. And then we have probiotics. Like I said, when you have an imbalance of bad bacteria, you could have a higher amount of estrogen in your body. So when we look at probiotics, we're trying to improve overall digestion, but also estrogen clearance. We're trying to get it out. So I want you to look for these two. Go with broad, perfectly fine, 10 billion units or more, but you want to make sure it has lactobacillus species or bifidobacterium. They're right there, those two. Now, when it comes down to other supplements, don't forget about magnesium. I have all my sleep clients on magnesium. Magnesium does so much, but when it comes to estrogen, it helps to support liver detox. It regulates enzymes that do break down estrogen. And any type of magnesium deficiency is very common with people that are really on the standard American diet, those bland diets, those foods with potatoes, takeout, burgers, anything that's just brown and bland, right? This part's hard. Fiber. Fiber is so important because you got to remember, soluble fiber helps to grab on to hormones and other harmful things in our body. So really, it helps to bind that estrogen in the intestines so you can package it out nicely. Also, your gut feeds on a lot of the material from your vegetables and nutrient-dense foods. So think fruits, vegetables, whole grains. Try to increase that to at least 35 grams at a minimum per day. Now, if you don't eat any fiber, you might have to start off slow, work your way up. Because if you start eating a ton of beans right away, it can cause a lot of bloating, gas, and discomfort. So just FYI, if you don't eat fiber to begin with, start out slow. Now, conventional treatments can be things like bioidentical hormones, BHRT. Now, when you look for something like this, you typically want to look for a really good pharmacy. How do we do that? You can look for the accreditations called PCAB or ACHC, or anyone that works with a compounding wholesaler called PCCA. A lot of these get a lot of their ingredients tested for impurities and other things that could cause harm in your body. So I like to look at that. PCAB and ACHC are accrediting facilities that look at safety for you. So it makes these compounding pharmacies go through rigorous testing and protocols to make sure they have a clean and safe environment to compound things effectively based on your doctor's prescription. Super important. Once you find those pharmacies, you can ask them who they work with, which doctors they like, and they can give you a good recommendation on how to get that taken care of. But if you don't want to go that route, you can also get a commercially available micronized progesterone. It's about $50. But the bad part here is there's only 2 doses, 100 and 200 milligrams. Also, if you have a peanut allergy, you might want to avoid it because they use peanut oil to make this. And you typically would take this right before bed because it can help you fall asleep and those types of things. But when you look at something like this, it's not customized. So just take that with a grain of salt, but it will cost you around $50. You can probably use GoodRx or one of those discounting sites to see which pharmacy has the best prices for you. But that is an option. It's also available in brand called Prometrium. And that's a pretty common one for this as well. So I like the BHRT route. That seems to be more helpful, more custom, and really touching on many other hormones that you might need, especially if you are in that menopause area. Now, with that, Our next presentation is going to be on PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, I know, and premenstrual syndrome. And this is me in the hospital, because if I had a period, that's exactly where I would be. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, share it with your friends that could use this type of knowledge, this type of breakdown. And as always, please consider subscribing. This is the way you support my channel so I can keep making videos on questions that you've always had.